Good afternoon. My name is Corey Hart. I am the Senior Product Manager at RBI. I am fighting a bit of a cold today, so bear with me. My understudy couldn't make the replacement, but my voice is coming back, so we should be all right. Thanks for joining me. We're going to be going through SmartCharts Pro today. We'll be going through some of the new features and ways that SmartCharts can be used. We're excited about this release. It's by far our most significant release since RBI Expert was launched 3-4 years ago. We're going to go ahead and dive right into it. I'm going to go through a few scenarios at first just to kind of get used to some of the different parts of SmartCharts and ways in which they can be employed. So one scenario that came up recently, and if you have questions as I'm going through this, my name's Corey Hart. It shows me as Jonathan Hill. But if you do have questions, feel free to use the questions panel over on the far right in the GoToMeeting panel, and I'll either try to cover them at the time you ask them, or we'll come back to those at the end. Okay, I'm going to try to keep this to 45 minutes, though I have gone over a bit, but I will do my best to keep this to 45 minutes. All right, that said, we'll jump right in. So here's the home page, which all of you should be familiar with at this point. So all the Mid-Atlantic region, this is for the core counties within MRS. This is the default display. You're going to most likely want to dive in deeper, and we'll go ahead and dive in deeper today with the first scenario that I want to run through. I have we had a customer call in from Sterling, Virginia, an RBI Expert, or former RBI Expert user, SmartCharts Pro user, excuse me, sometimes I get back to the old legacy name, SmartCharts Pro user that had a focus in Sterling, and she had some questions about how best to sort of position Sterling and if there were any trends that might have jumped out at me. So we dove right into, we started off in the Northern Virginia region just to see if there's anything special about Sterling other than, the fine people that live there and are looking to move there. And this is where we use the Explore feature. So all these stats, since I just changed the location to Northern Virginia, all the stats above are dealing with the Northern Virginia aggregate for those counties within Northern Virginia, Fairfax, Loudoun, Prince William, etc. So, for just the sake of context for the region at large, we're looking at 3.7 months of supply for Northern Virginia in August. That's still a buyer's market, although we'll see that it has moved somewhat more towards balance. 4 to 6 months is generally considered balanced, and because we're at 3.7 months, that's still a buyer's market, but the 5-year average is 3. So just the region wide, it's still a seller's market. But then when we dive into Sterling, which is where she wanted to focus, the Explore section gives me all the counties within Northern Virginia. For the default is the median sales price. So we can see Loudoun County, which is where Sterling is located, the majority of Sterling is located, we can see has a median sale price year to date of $435,000. So it's a bit higher than the Northern Virginia average. But I can change this, and we'll switch to another stat as well. So let's just look at median days on market. So median days on market in Nova, 19 days. It's higher than last year's year-to-date of 11 days. Here I can see that August, we're starting to see days on market pick up some, a bit more significantly than we had been, and that's partially because the market's becoming more into balance. But the thing that we used here is we switched back to median sales price, and we can see this by cities as well. So here, if we were to sort the median sale price by cities and sort it by year to date, so it's a more significant sampling, we can scroll down and see that Northern Virginia falls, excuse me, sorry about that. Anything above this line is more expensive than the regional average. Anything below this line is slightly more affordable or way more affordable than the regional average. And so when we look for Sterling, Virginia, we see that it's more affordable than the region at large at $370,000. So here's a good way to say, look, it's a more affordable area. That's a nice part of the narrative for this particular realtor. Another way to look at this is just to get at the Loudoun County level. So if we switch this to Loudoun County instead of Northern Virginia to get a little bit more close in. So again, all the stats up top are going to be pertaining to Loudoun County. We can see the months of supply there it's in a balanced market at this point. And then we can see the cities within Loudoun County. Sterling's more affordable by a significant margin than the county at large, which should help those sellers and should be increasing demand in that area, depending on how great the homes might be. But if we switch this to median days on market and switch this, then we see that Sterling, Virginia has a median days on market year to date of only 15 days versus 23 days for the region, for the county at large. So why is that? Here's where we can dive more into the charts themselves, just to get a quick peek at some of the things that Sterling might offer that, or Sterling trends might show that Loudoun at large might not. In terms of the median days on market over time, half the homes are selling in 26 days or less. We can see during the spring just how low they'd gotten. One thing that you can do here is you can actually combine the view to show different zip codes within Sterling, Virginia. So supply and demand, the months of supply. So this means that if no more homes went on the market from August forward, how many months would it take to sell through the active inventory at the end of August based off of the 12-month sales average over the last 12 months? So 2.8 months of supply is very low. We can turn this on to see how that compares with the county. And then specific zip codes within Sterling. If she wanted to focus mostly on, say, 20165 in Sterling, we can see how tight the market is there relative to other zip codes. 2016. So if we just type in Sterling down below, the smart box will offer up all the zip codes that meet that are in the city of Sterling. You can turn on 20164, etc. So here we can see the county average months of supply is 5.1 months, but all these Sterling zips are far below that. You could even turn on more Loudoun County zip codes that you're aware of just to show the contrast and show that Sterling, because of its affordability, is more of a seller's market. There are other stats that you can get into within Sterling, but that's just an example of ways to get context about a particular place, starting at the Explore tab and then diving further into the charts. And then if I just want a simple report that I want to share, take with me as a complement to my CMA, I might print out the local market insight report for Sterling, Virginia for August. And here we'll see, this actually doesn't have the same branding that your instance of the report would have because I'm just in an admin role, but this will say, Shirley Sterling, realtor at, office name, email, and phone number up top. So you'll get that branding, and this is just nice high-level views of how different metrics are comparing to the same month last year and 5-year averages. So, print that out. That's just if you're on the run, need to hurry, but want to look as professional as, enhance your brand as the statistics, as someone that's paying attention to the market trends. Print out that report, take it with you. It'll have your name on it and have all these fancy infographics. There's a lot of information in here, so I'm not going to spend time on that, on the individual information at this point, but definitely check out the Local Market Insight report if you haven't done so already. Another example of someone that's actually called into RBI, and I've spoken with this guy named Ron. He was a Montgomery County specialist for the most part, but he also dabbled sometimes in DC. He was getting a call for a list, or he had a listing presentation set up with a seller in Logan Circle. And when he first went to look at he just mainly went to those detailed reports and printed them out, and he saw some pretty saw that it appeared to be a pretty hot market, and he just wanted to see whether or not this was a monthly blip or if there was something really substantial going on here. So this was for 20005. We can see the months of inventory for DC at large is only 1.9 months. That's extremely tight, and that's why even though DC is at near record highs in terms of median sales prices, it's actually most of the DC metro area sort of flattened out. The exceptions would be DC, which had been seeing 4 to 5% year-over-year increases in price, and Prince George's County, which for another reason, not necessarily the tight supply, but because prices had been suppressed so much, there's a higher ceiling. But that's digressing a bit. His point was 20005. And whether or not that monthly report that he was looking at was just an anomaly because of the smaller sample size. He was mainly talking about the average sold price for sold properties. This was last month, so it might not be the same. Okay, so it's definitely not the same in August as it was in July. He was seeing a 10% year-over-year increase in average sales price. And when we looked, I said, okay, that's showing up on the monthly, but let's take a look at year-to-date. This year-to-date column is very important, especially when you get further into the year, because it gives you a wider sample to look at comparing this year versus last year to see which way it's trending. And we can see for 2005, when we sort by year-to-date, that it's beating the DC average, and its year-to-date percent change is let's see where to go. Third highest year-over-year percent change year-to-date. That's significant. West End, downtown DC were the only two other zip codes that beat out the Logan Circle price appreciation. So then there's the question of, when we're talking about a zip code, there's sometimes something called how homogeneous a zip code is makes the trend sometimes more relevant. Sometimes if you have a big mix of homes, a heterogeneous mix of homes where there's townhouses and condos and detached and they're all within the same community, sometimes just shifts in the types of inventory that's sold can make a more significant impact on the price appreciation. If more detached homes are sold, you might see bigger jumps. Then it might not necessarily be an organic year-over-year appreciation. So we went and looked at the charts themselves for 2005 just to see if that could be at play here. I'll turn these off. So for Logan Circle, it looks like there are not many townhouses and barely any detached homes. So it's almost all condos. And so when we look at the median sales price for, I'm sorry, I was looking at market activity. So when we look at closed sales for condos, 19 of the 21 properties that sold in this zip code were condos. So when we look at the condo price, median sales price, when we look at the year-over-year change, we can see that there's only 2 months where that percent change has gone down, and we can see significant increases in most months this year. We can also switch this to show by quarters. So we can see Q3 2013, there's a 5.5% increase, 18.1%, up to 30.5%, and this is all for like-type homes, meaning all condos. So that's shows demand's high there, and it's pushing that price up. So it's obviously a good place to be a seller, and that shows itself when we look at the months of supply within Logan Circle. Talking about 1 month of supply for condos. That's a place that as a realtor, I'd be dying to get listings because the market's doing the work for you. It's homes are going to sell there very quickly, and that 1 month of supply is what's pushing those prices up. So an important dynamic to understand whenever we're talking about real estate. It's the importance of supply and demand, those age-old, market dynamics of, more demand, less supply is going to drive prices up. As supply and demand come into balance, that's when you start to see a flattening out. So those are just two ways that we've kind of dove into a zip code level. You can also do that at a subdivision level and gotten stats that can help to set the context and give you as an agent more information going into that listing presentation, especially when it's a market you might not be as familiar with, as was the case with Ron. And then we dove into more and more stats. But the bottom line is, yes, that price appreciation is real and true, and should be a good case for anybody selling at that point. Another scenario, let's say that you're working with someone that's pretty ambitious with their prices. You're working with a seller. They maybe bought 2 years ago and they've seen the percent increases, and they can only take X amount of money, or they're not interested in selling at this time. You have your CMA for their listing, and you've got an idea of what price point would make the most sense excuse me, for them, but they're coming in maybe 10-15% higher than what you'd recommend they price at. Well, a good way to sort of to give them objective data to help support maybe a case for maybe less of an asking price, or an asking price that you feel is more market based, is to just give them the broader context within that particular market and what's been happening of late. Seasonality comes into play. If they're coming to you this month and they're saying, I want to ask 15% more than what I as an agent probably would think they'd ask, here's an important quick view of what happens seasonally. And using these charts can help to sort of set their expectations. That's just for condos. So this, if we go back 10 years, 10 years is a new metric, new feature within SmartCharts. We used to only go back 5 years for RVA Expert. But this gives a good view of the seasonality of the market. Sales go up and sales go down, spring, winter, spring, winter. That's, a lot of people understand that. A lot of just, homeowners understand that. They see more for sale signs this time of year. But earlier in the year, or sale signs especially. But if you contrast that also with new listings, you can see listings go up and before sales start happening, et cetera. And here you see a wider gap in Northern Virginia, and that's why we're starting to see more balance. There's a bigger gap between new listings and new sales, and that is softening the market somewhat in Northern Virginia. There's been sort of a normalization process that's happened over the last 8 to 12 months after a pretty frantic and frenetic seller's market last year. So being able to show the seasonality of the market, this sort of just confirms what their assumptions might have been about the market. But a lot of folks don't understand the impact that this actually has on sales prices. So this shows you that it's not just sales that go up in the spring, but the actual amount of money sellers are receiving is going up in the spring, as is borne out through the median sales price changes that show on a seasonal basis, spring and summer and winter. I can switch this, so this is the median sales price. I can also just show this for median list price for new pendings to be a bit more timely. And we can see, May is the peak. May is the peak. May and April are the peak, et cetera, and that's held true. Well, we're getting into October, September, October, then you can also make the case for, hey, we need to be more realistic. We're getting into the time of year where supply and demand are more in the buyer's favor than in the spring. So there's going to be less competition among sales, and that is borne out through this. I'm not saying make the case to wait until April or March, April, May, but me as a homeowner, that's when I'd sell. But these are charts to help support the fact that, to set the expectations that, hey, we're now into the slower time of the year, and that doesn't just impact the amount of time it might take to sell, as shown by the days on market. Here's days on market. You can see the seasonality there as well. It starts to go up October, 17 days, although that's very short. You can see the peak is down here. So we can expect to see this line continue to move up. So that's why it's important to have a realistic price point for your home, because it's going to take longer for it to sell, most likely, because there are less buyers in the market. And that finally, the final point, if I'm trying to make the sort of objective case for reasonable pricing on a home for this time of year, is if we look at the pricing ratios chart as well. So this is the median sold price to original list price ratio, and you see the seasonality working through that. So half the homes last May, half the homes got 100% or more of their original list price. That was previously last seen back in the bubble period, but it's not consistent like that. So I'm not saying we're in the bubble phase. But this was an extremely tight market, and that's why you were seeing this type of this high of median sales price to original list price ratios. But it went down as you got further in the season, and that's something else that we can pretty reasonably project will happen again this September, October, November, as it's going to go down, and so that's something to keep an eye on. The average sold price to original list price ratio is similar trends, never got up above 100%, other than back in the crazy times, but you see that seasonal pattern there. Now, I have a seller coming to me in October saying, I don't care, I want to ask for way more than you might suggest. Well, this is the kind of chart to help set their expectations. The final piece for this chart is if we just look at the average sold price to original list price ratio by days on market range. So here we're just looking at 1 month, and I'll switch this to bar view. So we can see for all home types in Northern Virginia, the average SP to OLP ratio is 97.2%. As I turn on more facets, so 1 to 10 days, 11 to 20 days, 21 to 30 days. So these are amount of time it took for homes to sell. They get put into these buckets, 31 to 60, 61 to 90, and so on, up to 6 months. Here we can see the gradual steps that happen. So this, as I'm trying to speak with the person that's being a bit too aggressive, maybe they're 5% above what I'm saying is a reasonable list price. Well, here it might take you longer, but the market's going to figure it out, and you're going to be at 6% less anyway if it takes you 91 to 120 days, and that's pretty consistent over, regardless of the time of year you're selling. It might be a bit more steep lately because the market's softened up. The other point to make is that if you're aggressive seller that wants to ask for way more than you'd expect, another thing to talk about is the fact that inventory has picked back up of late, and that's softening prices. It's making it so even though you had a friend last year that received 5% more than the original list price, that we're not in the same market as we were at that point. So in Northern Virginia, for instance, if we just look at supply and demand and months of supply, it's still not in balanced market territory, but it's getting closer, and it's been a significant uptick over the last spring and into the summer as more and more new listings were entered and sales didn't quite keep up with the new listing pace. So as this happens, then you start to see a softening of prices, and that's why when we look at pricing trends and the median list price for new pendings, when we look at the change from previous year, so this is just showing you the metrics. 409K is the median list price for August, and you see the seasonality in it. I can switch this to change from previous year, And here we can see just how crazy, or not crazy, but just frenetic the market was last year, where we were saying 15.5%, 12%, a lot of double-digit percent increases. But of late, since we've seen months of supply start to go up, we're seeing a flattening out of the median sales price locally. So this is important context for your seller to understand, A, we're going into the slower months, and B, we're not in the same seller's market. Even though we're in a seller's market, we're not in the crazy seller's market we were in last year. So let's look again at the CMA and let's talk about pricing again. That's sort of a long-winded, but my main point is try to get as comfortable as you can with 1 or 2 or 3, or if you can, 10 metrics that are of interest to you and you understand, and use those throughout your conversations with clients. Not only will it help you to set the right expectations, but it also, as your clients are going to other folks, they can say, hey, Joe Realtors, he really knows his stuff. He pulled up these charts on his iPad and really wowed me. So it's A, it's understanding the market better yourself. B, sharing that market knowledge with your clients for listing specific scenarios. And C, the more that your word gets out, that you pay attention to the nuts and bolts of the market, obviously the better off your brand would be. Another example that I've used actually with a friend, and I talked about this quickly in the last webinar, but I had a buddy that was going to work at AOL over in Dulles that was interested in, he was trying to figure out, he didn't want to spend more than like $350,000. Townhouse was okay, didn't have any kids, didn't need a huge house, but he just didn't want to break the bank on it. So what we did was, I was on my iPad, and he talked about a few places he was interested in, one of which was Ashburn, Virginia, which is right near AOL, so it would have been, ideal situation for him, commute-wise, because commuting around there is no fun anyway. What I did was I just switched this to just look at 3 months. Actually, I switched it just to look at quarters, just to get a wider sample. So we looked at 1 quarter. So the median list price for new pendings for all homes in Ashburn is $470,000. I switched this just to townhouses to see if that got him more in his wheelhouse, but it's still at $420K. So then I turned on a few other areas that I knew were nearby. South Riding, Virginia, which is a subdivision, but it's big enough to have relevant stats. Sterling, Virginia, which is also nearby. One that we talked about earlier. Centerville, Virginia, which is in Fairfax County, but it's a longer commute, but if you're interested in Fairfax schools. So here, just by 5 clicks basically, and I was doing this on my iPad, we got a sense of where Sterling, Virginia is an option, and Centerville, Virginia, and Fairfax County, that's an option at $327,000. So that's the median list price for new pendings. We can switch that over and look at the median sold price and see that it's pretty consistent. His go-to #1 spot of Ashburn might not have been in the price point that works for him, but Centerville got us there. I switched it over just to look at the price per square foot, and this I thought was interesting. Even though Centerville, Virginia attached townhouses were in that price point, median sales price range that would fit him, the price per square foot up there is actually higher than the other locations. So what this is telling me is that the townhouses in Centerville are smaller for the most part than in some of these new Loudoun cities like Sterling. Not that they're new, but Sterling and Ashburn and South Riding might have bigger townhouses. The Centerville ones might be older. But that's why you're seeing you're going to pay more price per square foot. There's a higher premium there than elsewhere. So that's something else to consider if he does look at Centerville. You should think about what you're getting for the money paid. So that's just an example of using compare locations to sort of help set the geographic context of how the market's moving. I could quickly switch this to show where homes are selling quickest. Days on market in South Riding was only 8 days in the second quarter. And also just change this to show by months to see all these areas have started to move up as we've gotten away from the spring market. So that's an example of using the compare locations. Any location that you'd be interested in that we have stored and aggregated, I can turn on Baltimore. Not that it makes sense in that context. I can change to the Baltimore metro region or the Baltimore County, cities within Baltimore, zip codes within Baltimore, or subdivisions within Baltimore, right here on the change location feature. Speaking of Baltimore Metro, another example of using SmartCharts to help. We had someone call in about foreclosures. They represented a buyer that was keen on getting information on foreclosures. They wanted a bargain, and they were looking in Baltimore County. So what kind of information does SmartCharts provide about foreclosures or short sales, that distressed market? I'm going to clear this out, and we'll switch over to Baltimore County, where foreclosures and short sales are having more of an impact than in Northern Virginia. Excuse me. So we'll switch this to look at, let's just say, 4 years worth of activity. We're still on days on market. I'm going to switch this just to look at closed sales in Baltimore County. So here we can see sales are up in Baltimore County. They have been for the last few years. That's how the Baltimore metro area is a bit different than the DC metro area, where sales in DC metro aren't quite reaching where they were last year at this time. Baltimore metro hasn't seen as big of price appreciation, so fewer people are being priced out of that market, and so Baltimore sales continue to hold pace with last year's sales rate. But the question about foreclosures, are they still an impact in Baltimore County? What's the latest trends there? So here I'll just turn on the bank-mediated facet. So the default is still all sales, but then I can turn on foreclosure sales and short sales. And here it doesn't really show me that much since all is still turned on, but if I just want to focus on trends in these two subsegments, then I turn off all, and I'll switch this to line view. And we can see lately in Baltimore County, there's been a sort of resurgence of foreclosures that have hit the market. There was a point where short sales and foreclosures were pretty even. Now, keep in mind, non-bank mediated and non-distressed sales are still the vast majority of the market. But this is saying that in this particular county, foreclosures are starting to bring rear their head a bit. We can switch this just to look at new listing activity and see that same story holds true. Now this is just the counts. We can change this to change from previous year. And here we can see that in some months there's double the number of foreclosures listed than last year at this time. There are 130% more foreclosures in Baltimore County listed in August 2014 than the previous August. I'll switch this back to actual values. So there is a market for foreclosures in Baltimore County. Let's take a look at the pricing trends there to see what kind of premium there might be, or what kind of discount there might be for foreclosures versus non-bank mediated. And we can see here, when I turn on non-bank mediated, it's just a nicer way of saying non-distressed. So use those hand in hand. All bank mediated is basically what you think of as distressed homes. Foreclosures, 118K. Short sales, 155K. And standard sales are at 234K. So this is showing that there is a huge discount for foreclosures, and there's an opportunity there to some degree for sellers possibly looking to flip or turn, invest in a foreclosure, build it back up, and put it back on the market. The price per square foot will most likely show this a similar story. So you're talking about paying $160 per square foot for standard sales versus $86 per square foot for foreclosures. You'd want to drill down into a specific zip code to get zip code specific or subdivision specific stats. But this just at a high level shows that that market is there. We can change this to look at days on market to see how aggressive a buyer might want to get at the time of when they're thinking about putting an offer out. And we can see that foreclosures and standard sales are pretty close. Foreclosures are actually selling a bit quicker, a bit faster than standard sales in August. And we can see that over time, the foreclosure market in Baltimore County has been a bit hotter than even the standard sale market because of the discounted price that we showed a second ago. Short sales are a different story, even though they're more of maybe a bargain. They're not selling as quickly, and there's a reason for that. And I'll show you that reason now because it's one of the most important things to understand about short sales versus foreclosures. It's something that we didn't offer reporting on until SmartCharts came out, and that is some of the other metrics within the days on market category. So for short sales, if we just look at short sales, and I'm going to switch this just to look at 1 year. So this is the median days on market. Half the homes went to contract in 57 days or fewer for short sales. Those homes that sold were on the market 57 days or fewer half the time. If I change this to look at the median contract to settle, or we'll switch this to average contract to settle. The average contract to settle, so this is talking about from the time a home went to contract, a short sale went to contract, because we're looking at short sales only. It took 138 days on average to get to final settlement. That's 138 days after the contract, ratified contract came through, while it was just sitting in process with the banks and all the different steps that a short sale needs to go through. And that's why we're seeing the median days on market up for short sales, because people understand it is a much longer process. Like if we just look at the average contract to settle for short sales versus foreclosures and non-bank metered or standard sales, the average time in the contract state is 44, 45 days for standard sales. So that's a big reason why some folks stay out of the short sale market. Conversely, if you're a short sale expert and you have connections that can help move the short sale along once it gets into pending status, I'm not saying there's many of you out there, but if you are one of those folks that say, hey, I know the process, I can move it along, then this is something that you'd want to show. Look, the average time in contract is 138 days. I work with this lender and that lender, and I know the steps, so my average time is only 90 days or whatever it might be. But this is a big reason why buyers are staying away from short sales at this point in time. The other big reason is another chart within SmartCharts, and that is the seller success rate. So the seller success rate, we'll just look at it for all homes first. The seller success rate is talking about for all homes that were in pending status that left pending status, they could either close successfully or they could fall out and either go back to contract, go back to active, what have you. or not go back to contract, go back to active listings, be taken off the market, etc. So it's just looking at those pool of pending listings at month's end. Those that didn't stay in pending, they went one way or the other. 84% of all homes that left pending status successfully closed in Baltimore County. So 16% fell through. When we turn this on for foreclosures, we can see that that is pretty consistent. It's exactly the same for foreclosures in this particular county. However, when we turn this on for short sales, it's a bit scary. We're talking about only 40% or so of short sales that are in pending contract that left pending. Only 40% are actually successfully closing. 60% are falling through. 60% are failing. That's another story that, if you have a buyer that's thinking, I got this short sale over here that I love, it's a bit better kept up, and I have this foreclosure that's a great deal, maybe it's a little more work, I'm really on the fence about it. I think that this helps to give them a better view of what they might be in line for if they go down the short sale path versus that foreclosure path. Foreclosures, the banks have already done all their headache stuff, and so they want to get rid of it. The short sales, they're battling back, and you got to jump through so many hoops. So this seller success rate, if no other stat to look at when you're talking about short sales, pay attention to the seller success rate for your location to see if that holds true with what we're seeing in Baltimore County. And you can easily switch if you have the seller success rate turned on. I can switch this to check how it looks for Northern Virginia. See if there's any sort of difference there. And here, there were some months where it was above 50%, but lately we're back below 40% for short sales in Northern Virginia, whereas standard sales and foreclosures are up at 85%. That's where I'm about to lose my voice. I'm going to have to cut off here, but I do want to answer any questions you all might have. I'm looking now in the standard. Let's see. What is bank-mediated short sales foreclosures? Okay, so bank-mediated basically means distressed. So and another thing just to keep in mind, we do have terminology. If you click on SmartCharts here and you go to support, so anything that I might not have covered here that you're interested in, especially when you're getting into months of supply and some of those more esoteric or some of the more complicated things, you can get into definitions. And here we have not only the definitions for our different facets, but we also have definitions for the different metrics that we have. But basically, non-bank when I switch this, I'll go back to statistics. So bank mediated is just it's a nicer term, I guess. We talked with MRS and some of our contacts there just about what are we calling distressed homes. I came from a software background at AOL. Real estate was new to me up until about 5 years ago, so I just always called foreclosure and short sales distressed sales. That wasn't the name that was politically correct or whatever. So we call short sales bank mediated. So banks involved, even though banks are involved in standard sales too, but bank mediated means distressed sales. Bank mediated is the combination of foreclosures and short sales. So this plus this, so short sales plus foreclosures equals all bank mediated. Non-bank mediated just means distressed sales. Short sales are just, that's where the buyer is, or the seller is trying to sell their home for less than the amount of mortgage they have left. And foreclosures means banks have already taken over the mortgage, or banks have taken over the property. The previous homeowner is no longer involved, and so they're bank mediated. They're REO, real estate owned by banks, and that was the, if we look at this over time, this is for all Mid-Atlantic, we can see just how far we've come from the really bad times in 2009. For the most part, we're back in a more reasonable territory. I uploaded SmartCharts to my Facebook page to automatically update. However, as of today, it is still showing July 2014. When should it update to August? So if you're uploading something to Facebook, Facebook isn't friendly on iframes, which is what embedding really is. So when we talk about embedding, since I didn't cover it, embedding means I'm clicking any particular chart and clicking embed, and then I get this little code snippet, and I can choose for auto update version or fixed date range version. If I do fixed date range version, it'll stay in August 2014 for forever. If I do fixed date range version, if I do auto update version on the 10th of the month, so on the 10th of October, you'll see September stats. As soon as we get new stats published into our system, your website will be updated. And so if I have a bunch of auto updates like I did here, I can see August stats. Now, if you're talking about Facebook, Facebook doesn't accept iframes. So I'm guessing then that you would have probably copied and pasted an image to make it work on Facebook, and the images don't auto update in the same way that the embedded objects will. If you'd like to send me the exact example, my email address, and if you have other questions that I haven't answered on this call, again, my name is Corey Hart. My email address is Corey, C-O-R-E-Y, @rbintel.com. That's Corey, C-O-R-E-Y, @rbintel.com. Go ahead and email me the specific page that you're talking about, and I can take a look and see if I can get you a more specific answer. If you did the auto update version elsewhere, on a website or blog, then it should be showing August for sure. So definitely shoot me an email and we can look into it. Are there any other questions that I can cover? I apologize for again my voice and sort of running through this rather quickly. Let me know if you have any other questions. Again, I can be reached at Corey@rbintel.com. I appreciate you joining me today. Everyone have a great weekend. I hope you stay away from whatever this bug is that I've got. There's a cold going around South Riding that hasn't been much fun. But everyone have a great weekend. Again, email me if you have any further questions, and we'll go from there. All right, thanks everybody.